Yeah, what a great topic to be able to talk about. You know, food is obviously it's an amazing thing. It's one of the main joys of life, and obviously we cannot exist without it. We participate in it every day, sometimes several times a day, and it brings excitement and wonder and variety to our lives, as well as sustaining us. We all need and all use food. And even though our food system is a major factor causing climate change, the great thing is that every single one of us can take action to make it better. And through our actions, we can have a positive impact on mitigating climate change through changing our habits and some of our behaviours, something which we do every day of our lives throughout our lives. So we do have an opportunity to do something. We have a world where 850 million malnourished people, yet also there's 1.2 billion obese people. In the UK, that equates to, there's identified as about 4.7 million in the UK are identified as severely food insecure, yet over 20 million of us are overweight and obese. Our food system is clearly unequitable, not sustainable, and is also exhausting the world's resources, using far too much energy and depleting the land of its natural fertility. Now this data, this graph here, identifies that of total global greenhouse gas emissions, the food chain is responsible for 26% of it. And what's great about this graph is that it takes that 26% and it breaks them down into the various areas of what causes those greenhouse gases. And the main things, as we can see from this, the change of land use, the desertification, the cutting down of the forests to create agriculture, and then obviously the way we farm, the way we grow our crops. And then at the top, you can see that things like actually transport and the retail and the packaging side are actually much smaller percentages related within the food industry. So obviously the fossil fuel within the machines, the fossil fuel for creating fertilizers and feeds, etc., is what feeds into the carbon emissions and the methane from livestock, etc. However, as well as climate change, and I know this is what we focus on, is the climate change, we've got to understand that the food industry and those are affecting the other 8 boundaries, the not planetary boundaries. There was a study by a group 11 years ago that identified these planetary boundaries, the climate crisis being one, biodiversity loss, the nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle. Everything we do is having an impact on each one of these boundaries. And the red there is identifying those boundaries which have already been exceeded. And the green is identifying that that's the sort of tipping point. And as you can see, there are other areas which are we are pushing the boundaries on, and that there will be a consequence on it eventually.
Terry,
here in the UK, that 26.
Sorry, can I just ask, Terry, will we be able to have copies of your slides?
Yes, I'll share the presentation. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, here in the UK, so that 26%, in the UK, that's 20% of our greenhouse gases. So it's still a substantial number. And I pulled out Tim Lang because he's a good example. He's a good, as far as using some of his words, he's academic, heavily involved in policy, and so he's a renowned figure that's worth taking note of. He's one of many, but he's clearly identifying there that that quote of, although not officially at war, the UK is facing a wartime scale of food challenge. We import 50% of our food. That means we only grow 50% of our food. But when you look at that breakdown, I think one of the stark things is that only 3% of the area is cultivated for fruit and vegetable. That's a massive opportunity to be able to grow more. And as a result, unfortunately, a lot of what our land is put to within agriculture is to livestock and for processed foods. And the way we farm, and this is probably the key one, and we could spend a lot of time on this one, but the key one is the way we farm. It's completely unsustainable, and our production methods are damaging our environment and our human health. And off the back of that, as you can see at the bottom, we're saying that the NHS has to deal with a massive outfall of the poor food chain which we have. There are so many issues, and that's the trouble with today. Capturing it in 20 minutes is just impossible. There are so many issues. They're all interwoven. They're entangled with each other. And I have to admit, didn't really know where to start. So this is really just an introduction. It's often the case of you're almost making the least worst decision, because one decision that you make will affect the other. And so it's really hard to completely solve it. However, what I tried to do, I was trying to think, well, how can I unpack all these individual issues around our food industry? So I tried to group them around to 4 headings. And as I said, I'm only going to touch on them briefly. Some of it's going to be a bit based on my opinion. And there's nuances to every aspect of the debate. But at least there's something I'm going to give you a bit of a foundation that at least you can research beyond. And the 4 sections that I'm going to look at is poor diet, the power of the supermarkets, food waste, and poor farming practices. So poor diet, whilst obviously it's not directly correlated to our climate change issue, the way we do produce the food and obviously the outcome of poor diet does have a dramatic effect on a lot of other areas of our life. 25% of UK adults and 20% of children are obese, i.e. they're higher than their BMI banding. Diabetes rates are high, approximately 4 million people when increasing. 42,000 deaths in 2017 from heart disease. I noticed an article in this paper this week that identified that hospitalizations through obesity had reached 1 million cases per year, which had doubled over the last 5 years. It's clearly a major issue in the UK and the West. The UN identifies that an adult requires around about 1,800 calories. In the UK, we're way over that as far as the average calories that we're intaking. And adding to that, all those various items there, the diet within the Western world and the UK is seriously under pressure, and we need and can fix it. When we're looking at the supermarkets, the reason I identify this is that as a country, we rely on 90% of our food being provided by just 8 companies. It's an incredible reliance on such a fragile food chain and supply chain. And the problem with that type of monopoly is that prices have been driven down, and the supply chain is feeling that constraint in as much as that their costs, what they get has been suppressed so low that they're struggling to produce in many areas. But supermarkets are guilty of many issues, but also the great thing is that they also could potentially be game changers in this, whether that's around single-use plastic, or it's whether around changing their attitude to cheap food and lost leaders, out of season food, etc. But it's certainly an area which I'm sure many of us have bought into as far as the use of supermarkets. One of the key areas also is food waste, and I'd really encourage you to have a look at that TED talk that's identified there. Tristram Stewart looking at food waste, and he presents it quite visually. He's a bit of an activist on it, and he goes, as he identifies, bin diving in the waste bins at the back of supermarkets to see the incredible amount of waste which supermarkets throw out. And he uses a visual aid of, he takes a packet of biscuits and he takes 9 biscuits, and he says those 9 biscuits, they represent the total food production in the world. And he says, so the first one I'm going to take, and I'm going to throw away the first one, that represents the food that doesn't even leave the farm due to poor storage and poor harvesting. He said the next 3, that food I'm going to give to livestock. He said the problem with giving it to livestock is that they're poor, they are inefficient providers of food. They convert 2/3 of that into methane and excrement, so that only 1 biscuit, 1/3, can be given, is available for food for the population. He then takes another 2 and throws away another 2 and says that represents the food which is wasted once it leaves the farm, so in the transport, in the packaging, and through retailing, and through us throwing away. So we started with 9, we're left with 4. That's 55% of food which we grow does not get to human consumption. It's just complete and utter madness. And we often hear about how we're going to feed the world's burgeoning population of 9 billion. Well, it's really easy. We just need to take 10 or 20% of that waste and convert it back to being eaten. It's an incredible concept, the millions of tons of food which are actually thrown away or ploughed back in. Food waste, a massive issue, but something that we can deal with. And finally, the 4th area, and I think the most important, and probably the one we are less aware of because we're not involved with it, but poor farming practices. Since the Second World War and the change of farming practices in the UK to produce just lots of food, being subsidised to just produce yield, has created a farming environment which is definitely not sustainable and is damaging the fertility of the soil beyond belief. It's estimated that obviously we've been losing topsoil since man started cultivating thousands of years ago. But since the 1970s, it's estimated that 1/3 of the world's topsoils have been washed away. Ploughing and not having cover crops and is a real, not using organic matter and just providing synthetic chemicals is damaging our soils beyond belief. You add to that things like, as you say, we rely on monocultures. Just 3 crops account for more than 60% of the calories consumed across the world. As I indicated back in the previous one, a third of the food that we grow is given to livestock. Like food that could feed 3 billion people actually only ends up feeding 900 million people because of the inefficient use of livestock. It's definitely another area, a major area worldwide and specifically in the UK that needs to change. So that paints a pretty bleak picture. However, what I started with, the great thing I like about food is that we can do something about it. We often feel, as far as climate change, that we can't do anything about it. It's beyond our means. But we can, because we're dealing with food every day. And it's certainly a journey that I started a few years ago with the family. And I was really focusing on how, I have to admit, it started from how could I reduce sugar? I just wanted to take sugar out of my diet. So what that did is that made me start looking at food labels. And so I was conscious of food labels. Once you start looking at food labels, you start looking at everything else. Where's that food come from? What are the ingredients? How harmful are those ingredients? Look at the packaging. Look at the fat contents. You start looking more and more at what is that food, how it's come to. And I think that's one of the problems, is that we're so distant from where our food comes from. So you have to start researching and digging further. And so along with trying to get rid of sugar, trying to get rid of single-use plastics was my other driver. I started looking at every aspect, and I just researched more and more. And this is scattered across this slide is effectively a lot of the decisions which we made to do. The bottom line, without a doubt, is less. Just like when we look at energy, our use, or everything, our consumption, it is about less. We have created a society where, you know, portions are large, and that we do, as I said, snack and we waste, etc. So less is the key driver. And without a doubt, it soon hit quite hard that less meat is probably the most significant thing that we can do. What we eat is so much more important than where it comes from, as I identified in that first slide that showed that actual transport is relatively small. And I'm just going to move on to one slide, which it might be difficult to see, but basically this shows the greenhouse gas emissions across the supply chain. And that top bar is beef, basically. It's the way and that what this graph is showing is that it's identifying kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of food. And as you can see, that beef is up there at 60 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram. And if you follow that bar back down, the next best is lamb and mutton. But if you then take that down to something like beans or other protein, which would substitute the protein that comes from beef, we're looking at beef being 60 times more larger emitter of greenhouse gases than other staple diets. It's a dramatic visual impact that really identifies that beef, and certainly the way beef is generally farmed across the world, is a major issue. So less meat is definitely one of the driving aspects. And we grew up in a traditional family. We were probably eating meat, 5-6 times a week. I would say we're probably now down to once, maybe twice at most. And it was a relatively easy change, and it's been really interesting. Now, I'm definitely not against meat. There is a massive part for livestock to play in regenerative farming practices. We need them through how they crop land, through how they fertilize land, but they need to be grown on grass. They don't need to be factory farmed on pellets and grain. So if you're going to buy beef, you make sure that it's 100% grass-fed. There's dietary improvements from grass-fed meat. There's less greenhouse gas emissions from grass-fed beef. And the great thing is that in Britain, we're very good at growing grass. So we have some of the best meat in the world. There's lots of other things to do. I initially stopped using the supermarkets. I looked to use local greengrocers and refill shops, and we've even turned to the milkman. But I have to admit, on reflection, the supermarket, as much as I don't like what the supermarkets are doing at the moment, they can be game changers. And so I think we need to challenge them more. We need to keep asking what they are doing about single-use plastic. about overproduction, about the poor dietary standards, etc. So I think we do need to keep writing to them, campaigning against them. I'd really encourage everyone to go organic, because organic means less pesticides, less synthetic fertilizers, less water usage, all the things that damage our soils and our watercourses. Organic helps against mitigating some of those damages. And what I also did with the guys was did a kitchen cupboard audit. You only need to do one cupboard. As I said, take the food out, start looking at the ingredient labels, look at the sugar content, the fat content, where that food comes from. Look up some of the ingredients and just find out what damage they do to the environment. I think you only need to do it to a few food items, and I think you have your eyes opened. And then it's about identifying what change can I make for that particular food item, you know, and see if you can change one product at a time. And I think the other conclusion that I came to is, do you know what? I need to pay more for food if I can. And we've been subdued by or seduced by cheap food. We always want to know how cheap our food is. Food has been driven down to a very low sort of foundation. And I recognise that some people are struggling with food across our country. I get that, and that we need to deal with that. But if we can afford to pay more, I'd rather pay more now than leave money to my children and know that they're going to have to pick up a much bigger bill. Paying more means that they are being produced in a much more ethical and sustainable way. The key is because obviously a lot of the producers are not paying for the environmental consequences of how we produce. Therefore, I would really encourage, if we can afford to pay more, then let's do it. So amongst those other things, you know, I identified there, reducing and processed foods, signing up to newsletters such as Friends of the Earth, or there's plenty of campaigns and government petitions going on. So even if you don't want to write letters all the time, there are some simple petitions where you can just add a name and an email address to. So I think there's lots of things that we can do. And it definitely is a journey, and we can't solve it all in one go. But we can take individual actions week by week, one item at a time, and change our carbon footprint, change the damage which we're doing to our biodiversity, improve our health, through our diet. One food at a time. So just in conclusion, I did this final slide just capturing some of those sort of leads. There's so many. I did watch the Greta Thunberg documentary recently and was encouraged by it. And I just was struck by the quote she said, you know, there's no hope without action. And I think that what we as individuals can do around food can bring a lot of hope. And if you want to find one really powerful, or watch one really powerful documentary which would open your eyes to the farming practices that are happening there, I would look at Kiss the Ground. It's a fantastic documentary which really succinctly and clearly identifies the issues. Now, Kiss the Ground, I think, is a Netflix, but Sustainable St Albans are viewing this Kiss the Ground movie. So if you was to, I think if you was to look at their program and sign up to their event on Kiss the Ground, they'll send you a link for free to allow you to watch it. So I'd really encourage you to do that. But other than that, I just encourage you to make some pledges and challenge yourself to see if you can deal with one thing at a time with how we eat and therefore have an effect on how damaging our food industry is. Thank you.
Just as Tony said that many people here in Uganda grow food from their own gardens, we've been privileged to be owning land at individual levels. Anyone can buy a wholesale land and they can do anything according to what they want. And many people here, since agriculture is the backbone of Uganda, which produces most of the Uganda's economic GDP, it has contributed so much over the years, and though it is receding now, we hope that people will change their mindsets, however, improve their activities in agriculture and production of food. So many households grow their food and different kinds of food from their gardens, which they sell some and retain some for consumption. And as you can see some facts displayed, the Global Hunger Index in 2018 was a little less, higher by 31.2 compared to that one of 2016. And we have more hunger in Uganda than any other East African countries. Yet we have very good climate conditions, I would say. We are living in the tropical area where it rains almost every day, just like today. And we are able to grow food almost throughout the year. And however, due to climate change, nowadays we have prolonged drought and heavy rains that cause floods throughout the periods and in different areas, which disturbs farmers' activities for growing food and thus reduces the availability of food in the country for many people at both household level and at the national level. In different areas where foods that are rich in calories, for example, the milk where it is produced in areas of Teso and the western part of Uganda, in Mbarara, where most people are cattle farmers, they experience a lot of drought, which hinders the production of such kind of foods in those areas and reduces the production at the national level, hence scarcity. And this has affected people in different years throughout, just like in 2016 when people in Karamoja got hit by hunger due to drought. Both the animals were affected and the people couldn't get enough from these animals they were having because they could not feed. The soils were dry and there was no green grass to feed on. Even the dry grass was not that favorable for the animals. So many people died and many got stricken from the diseases that come out of hunger, and this has caused a lot of pain and to the people. All of this resulting from the climate changes that are affecting the nation. Just of recent, to add on, last year in May, we had heavy rains that filled up Lake Victoria, and the excess water was not even going to River Nile or being transported to the other areas where River Nile goes by. And this resulted in, disturbed many activities of agriculture in the country and displaced many people. Many people got hungry because their fathers, who are fishermen on Lake Victoria, could not go to fish from the lake, and those who were farming around Lake Victoria, their gardens were destroyed, and they could not get any more money, and emergency support was provided by the government to these people, and many shifted from these areas. Yes. We were able to write a short report about this last year. I hope you were able to read the Herald magazine on pages 12 and 13. I hope you did. Am I still there? Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. I thought my network had gone off. Well, this has affected the many people, and many children have suffered diseases. Hospitals are not only full of people who are sick from COVID and other normal diseases like malaria, but there are those suffering from hunger and malnutrition. The children at Good Samaritan are very lucky to be able to get food throughout the year. They do farm it in the gardens that the school owns. And around the school, we grow vegetables like cabbages, cauliflower, which the children feed on. And this provides availability of food in case the administration does not have enough money to buy more food from the markets, or like the beans, if they are unable to grow, to buy them. This is creates availability of food for the school. And we try to train the children to go back home and to encourage their parents to grow vegetables around their houses, because we know they do face hunger problems in their houses.
Rosemary, can I interrupt? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay. I mean, this is so important. It gives a great contrast with what we heard earlier from Terry. Is it possible, just in the last few minutes, just to give an update generally about the school? Now, we know that there's been this lovely project going on, this great project to build a new washroom toilet for the girls. Can I ask, how is that going? Because I know we'd be interested to see what the progress is. Could we just change the subject to that, relating to that school, please?
Oh, yes, please. I will share my screen again.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, carry on.
Well, the project is going on very well, and we have been able to start off. I believe you've been receiving reports on how we've been going about. We started with 6 feet in February, and we shifted to 35 feet by the end of February. We are lucky that although the rains disturbed us, we managed to go through this, and we covered the pit earlier enough so that we keep the children out and the rains out from the pit. And the construction work started by measuring the ground, and by 24th April, that's last month, we had built the wall to 6 feet high. as you can see in the photo. So we continue supplying the materials to the school and the contractors, so that they, even though the rain disturbed, they had the materials available for use and to continue their job. Currently, this is what is happening at the school, and we are almost finishing. We are almost roofing. We hope that in 2 weeks' time, when they've finally completed, we will be able to roof and do the finishing. And we hope that by the end of the month, next month, the children will be able to use the facility. And we send thank you messages from Good Samaritan. This is how the facility looks like. I'll be able to share this later through Tony. I hope you will distribute this to everyone who may want to look at it. And the children do send greetings, and the directors as well. And they do thank you for all your continued support and monitoring, checking up on us. Not only did you provide us with the funds, but you also continue to check on us or to see how we are doing, not only in regards to this facility, but also other things. We thank you so much for this, and we hope that you continue checking us on Facebook. We do share the continuous progress we are making there. You can check us out, Infinity Ideas Network, to see that you check out, you follow what we are doing. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, so it's the Facebook Infinity Ideas Network who would give us the latest situation. So that's wonderful. That's really, really nice to see that. Yes.